My name is Kim Rezanka. I am the managing shareholder of the Dean Mead Vieira Melbourne office. I am a commercial litigator. I focus on contract disputes and real estate litigation. I also practice in the land use area, so starting with entitlements all the way to platting, all the way to code enforcement if that becomes an issue. So I really enjoy listening to all this. I work with Commissioner Barfield, or we work together sometimes, but quite a bit, and I'm excited about the panel we have today. I'm going to do this a bit different. I'm going to introduce them alphabetically and then let them speak, and then we'll go to the questions after that. First is Commissioner Jim Barfield. Commissioner Barfield was elected to Brevard County Board of County Commissioners in November of 2014 and was elected to serve as chairman in November of 2015. Professionally, Commissioner Barfield is president and CEO of Luke & Associates, headquartered in Rockledge, Florida. Luke & Associates works to staff military medical treatment facilities worldwide in non-combat zones. Commissioner Barfield has been a resident of Brevard County since 1962. He earned a Master's of Public Health Policy and Management degree from the University of South Florida and a BS in Environmental Health degree from Eastern Tennessee State University. For that, Commissioner Barfield, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in the county?
How much time do I have? Hey, thank you for having me here. This is a good event. I went to the one last year. I'm glad to be here. As county commissioner, I have District 2, which is the central part of Brevard County. That's my district, happens to be where I grew up too. But now somehow I ended up becoming the chairman of the county commission, and there's a lot that goes along with that. But really, our county, I've been here and seen the ups and downs back in the Apollo days. It went down and came back, and then it went down again. And we're on that stage right now where we're taking the lessons we learned back then and we're diversifying. You can see, as Linda was talking about, the different types of companies we're bringing in, trying to expand the ones we have. So we have a diverse workforce, so we're not dependent all on one industry. With manufacturing, with commercial space, with all kinds of other small companies you really wouldn't know are here, but they're working here, and it's amazing. So that's one of the big things we were working towards. The other thing is, it goes right along with that, is economic development. We have to make sure that this is a place that people do want to come to. Our county is, never enough budget. It's tough to make things go the way you need to. But we can't jeopardize anything that has to do with what our culture is here. We like parks. We like libraries. We like our beach. We love our beach, and I like to surf our beach. But there's a lot of things we cannot jeopardize. So we have to be careful. And those are things that's tough right now, balancing everything. And in my role, I have to use a lot of my experience to try to help get things pushed through. It's always challenging on a county commission with, you have 5 people and you have to always figure you just need 3 votes, sometimes 4. It's not like it is in business, and that was a big challenge for me personally. But I have to say this, our county commission is dedicated to this county. The people who work in this county love this county and are dedicated. And that, to me, it means more, really, than a lot of other things. So we have to deal with the change. We have to deal with infrastructure change. There's a lot of things that we have coming up. And I am the fortunate person to be on the county commission. And quite frankly, I love it. So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next is Wayne Justice. Wayne was elected to the Canaveral Port Commission in November of 2014 from District 3 for a term beginning January 2015. He currently serves as Vice Chairman of the Commission. He has a Bachelor of Science from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy and a Master's of Science from Nova University Southeast and the Naval War College. He served 37 years in the Coast Guard, mostly on cutters conducting search and rescue, counter-drug, and illegal migrant patrols, retiring as a 2-star admiral.
A lot of information comes out in various ways about what's going on at the port. And every now and then you hear it from someone who's there. It's not a bad thing. Just a reminder, 1953, we were just a kind of hole in the sand. 61, the first cruise ship came there, and it was in the mid-60s, and there was I think it had 600 passengers or something. Here we are now. And just make a point, the actual port property really is like that, meaning there's little room for growth, but obviously that'd be a real challenge. Just quick stats, 300 acres plus the barge canal, and you get about $85 million a year in revenue, and mostly out of cruise. I'll talk some more about that in a little bit. We kind of break our business lines in four ways. Most importantly, you got to have water underneath the keel. Ships are getting bigger, and you need to have the ability to bring those ships in. We've recently gone to 46 feet. We are blessed in Port Canaveral, and we're blessed in Brevard County. The water, the sand there is benign, if that means something. It's not coral, doesn't have reefs and all that sort of stuff. We pick up the sand, we take it out to sea, or we put it on our property to be used later. But it makes it a little bit easier. I know the transportation appreciates this when it comes to the permitting side of the house, particularly the Army Corps of Engineers, for us to make our channel deeper for the demand that industry has for us. Cruise, this year, our crown jewel was Terminal 1, parking garage, terminal, and most importantly, the ability to bring bigger ships in. $104 million in about 14 months to produce it. And in this fall, the largest cruise ship in the world will be home ported here. So that's pretty exciting. Cruise industry, I saw again in the paper today, is just, it's nonstop. The way the cruise industry works, I'm as sure as most of you know, you have to have infrastructure. They have global options where they can put their ships, and you've got to have infrastructure for them to bring their ships to where you are. We have a wonderful port. Our location with regard to Orlando International Airport is super, and the reality is we can't build enough terminals. In that vein, this is a super busy day, but not all that unusual. We've got 6 ships tied up here. On this Sunday, 45,000 people transition through the port. As what we're doing right now, again, to keep up with demand, Cruise Terminal 5 right here has been completely gutted. It's being refinished on the inside. We're making the terminal longer, and we're to accommodate bigger ships. As soon as that gets done, Terminal 10 down here, you saw in the paper today, Norwegian Cruise Lines really likes that terminal, and they're going to bring their biggest ship here this fall. They're going to stay here a couple of years. We've got to take Terminal 10, do the same thing, about $40 million worth of renovations to make that what we need to have. As well, of course, and this is a little different operation here, but Disney does things their own way, as we all know, and we're spending $2 or $3 million on that terminal as well to keep them current. So it's all about having the facilities, the infrastructure to allow business to grow. Quick slide, there's no walls around our port. Cruise ships come here for ports of call. They want to go someplace. We're open for business. Our job is to have the transportation flow, to get people out to wherever they want to go, whether it be Kennedy Space Center or Orlando or Cocoa Village or some local kayaking. We really don't care. But that business that's all part of our cycle. There's no walls around this port. Shifting gears, we have a lot of land. We are a unique port. If you ever go to Fort Lauderdale, Miami, you don't take your bikes up to the cruise ships and watch them leave. You don't take tours. You don't have lunch there. It's closed. Our port's open. It's the people's port, as we get reminded pretty much daily. And that said, the waterfront, of course, is placed, but we've got more real estate, and we're working to develop it. And so that's happening, including a hotel. I'll leave that there. Cargo is certainly an opportunity. If we get $60 million a year in cruise revenues, so does Fort Lauderdale. They also get $60 million a year in cargo revenue. We get about 8. So certainly there's some room for improvement. Right now we bring in petroleum, we store it, we pump it to the cruise ships. Morton Salt is expanding. Real strong business right now is slag. Slag is a byproduct of steel production overseas. It's brought in, you bring it in, and we put it on barges, and it goes up and down the East Coast. It helps strengthen concrete. Ambassador Services here is just bursting with potential more business in bulk and break bulk. You've got cars coming in now, twice a month. That's a nice revenue thing. They're here 3 or 4 hours. They drop off a few hundred cars, and on the way they go. And that business is going to grow. And most importantly, our potential for containers. We've got 2 pretty small cranes. Not much to them, but they're a start. And we are committed to grow the containers. As it is right now, we've got containers coming in and being distributed through our region. From a land use perspective, to me, this is probably the biggest thing we did in the last year. As we talk about being constrained on our port property, we have very, very rigorously expanded what we called an inland port. And if you go up, I think most of you have probably seen up in, going up to Titusville, north of the old power plant there, this building is just about done. And it's going to be over for business in the next couple of months. The ability to bring goods and services in, truck them up to here, put them on the rail line, and we're doing that right now. And it's a pretty exciting thing to see some new construction up in Titusville. I guarantee you that. I know they appreciate it. We're excited about it. The other place that we're doing the same thing in is out 524-995. We purchased 270 acres, of which we've we're in the process of actually selling half of that. But we are going to, again, we're putting, over here we're looking at a couple of 500,000 square feet distribution centers, which will, again, get the goods off of the port, get them into the county and in for distribution. It's all about infrastructure. I keep saying that. Again, just talking about the Cox Road property. And I'll finish here. I'll just wrap up, but I want to make the point. You know, ports are local assets, regional assets. Ports are national assets. I certainly, with my background, truly appreciate that and committed to supporting that. It's certainly a gateway for goods and services into our nation, and that's where we're at. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Dale Ketchum on the far end in the bow tie. Dale currently serves as Space Florida's Chief of Strategic Alliances. In this role, Dale utilizes existing and developing networks to advantage the state of Florida as the recognized leader in the civil, commercial, and military space marketplace through innovation, collaboration, and influence. Dale came to Brevard County in 1955. He spent 30 years at Kennedy Space Center working with major prime contractors, the U.S. Congress, Enterprise Florida, and the University of Central Florida. Dale received his philosophy degree from the University of Florida.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to y'all. I'll just go through these real quick, but I like to use slides because we have pictures of neat stuff and maps that help put things in perspective. Just real quick on Space Florida, most people don't really know what the heck Space Florida is. We're kind of a nuanced organization. We're primarily, we're a state special district like the Canaveral Port Authority or the Airport Authority, and our job, we're a spaceport authority. We also do financing. We've got some really neat financing tools that make us a key part of any statewide partnership that attempts to attract and recruit work here, such as, I forgot to turn the damn thing on, didn't I? Yeah, okay. There, does that work? And like, take for example, Northrop Grumman, that was Enterprise Florida, Space Florida, EDC, or Blue Origin, that was Space Florida, Enterprise Florida, EDC, Brevard, North Brevard Economic Development Zone. What our role is like, again, Northrop, we will actually own $200 million worth of facilities and $300 million worth of equipment, and then lease them back to Northrop. That enables them to offer a proposal to the Air Force that's very attractive and thus enabled them to win. It's a great package. We're we're pleased to be a part of teams. Anytime you get a big project like that, it's clearly a partnership. And we have our toolkit. The EDC has its toolkit. The state has its. Unfortunately, as was pointed out, the state's, in the wisdom of the legislature and the governor's office, they're not going to have as many dollars for incentive. They wanted $250 million. They didn't get it. But Liz told me the county would make that up.
No, the port is.
Oh, okay. So we'll deal with it. We have to. But our job is to grow the aerospace sector in the state. We're not just a Brevard County entity. We get tax money from everybody. We owe as much to Brevard County, and we owe just as much to Escambia County in the Panhandle or Collier County in Southwest Florida. This is existing spaceports around the country, and what keeps us up at night is these are the new spaceports. The one that causes us, we're already upset about losing SpaceX's commercial launch activity to Brownsville. They're still going to be here. They still have a major presence. But they wanted to get away from the Air Force and NASA and have their own purely commercial launch site. We didn't have the opportunity to give them that here in time, so they went to Brownsville. As much as it pains me, if it was my money, I'd do the same thing. We're trying to fix that problem, but what causes us the most concern is that one in Camden County, Georgia. They're starting their own environmental impact statement process, and they have a nice piece of property. That particular location was Plan B for the Apollo launch site had it not come from here. So you can do business from Georgia just as effectively. Our job is to make sure that we don't lose any more. So we got our hands full. This is kind of stuff we're trying to recruit here, at least on the space side. A lot of this, most of you are familiar with. Some of it, it's not. It's all neat. It's exciting. I think what we feel, I think one good way to understand what we do is we have a little plastic encased Florida quarter. If you all recall, in 2004, the state came forward with a Florida quarter. And fortunately, the state chose to put an icon of the space program on the back of its quarter. There were 3 icons, a galleon, space shuttle, and something else I don't remember. But if you want to think about what Space Florida does, our job is to see to it when the state does that again in 30 or 40 years. The state of Florida considers space so much a fundamental component of its self-identity that we will again choose to put an icon of the space program on our quarter, assuming we're using silver currency in 40 years, who knows. This is just a reflection of your tax dollars at work. This is, all totaled, the state of Florida either owns or finances about $500 million worth of space infrastructure in the Space Coast area. Now, some of it is owned outright, like the Atlas V launch site. We own that, lease it back to United Launch Alliance. Some of it is financed, some of it is just incentive money, like Florida Department of Transportation money to help grow SpaceX's redevelopment of Launch Complex 39A, the old shuttle launch pad. And this is just a good example. These are all the launch sites that are out there, and to those of you who are familiar with our efforts to get the launch site at Shiloh, north of Kennedy, well, it's on Kennedy Space Center, but the far north of KSC. There's a question of why can't we just grow more at the existing launch sites. Those are the existing launch sites, and what that map is supposed to identify is there's a limit to how much you can squeeze activity into the Cape, because if you're familiar with launch activity, it's really hazardous, and when you have an activity, you got to evacuate for a considerable distance in either way, and if you get to a significant ops tempo, and you're having to evacuate, and you're squeezing everybody in there shoulder to shoulder, because if, like when the Navy used to do launch activity off of Launch Complex 25, and they had to vacate everyone, then you, as part of your launch costs, you get to pay for everybody's employee going home for the day. That gets expensive. And when you have places like Texas and Georgia, where you can launch and not bear that cost. That's the kind of competition we're up against. So we're trying to avoid trying to squeeze everybody into a limited number of areas. Because at the end of the day, the primary responsibility at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station is national security launch. It should stay that way. National security should not stand down because somebody's running a commercial enterprise. The same with Kennedy Space Center. Fortunately, hopefully someday in the future, we're going to have an aggressive ops tempo of going to the moon or Mars or asteroids. I don't care where, let's just go. But when we have that mission operating, you can't ask somebody, you can't stand down that mission because somebody's running a business. So businesses are not going to assume that risk when there are places to go where you don't have that risk. So that, again, is part of the challenge we're confronting. Blah, blah, blah. That's just our usual why we need additional commercial launch sites. And this, I think, is a good representation. We are working on the Cape Canaveral Spaceport. The Cape Canaveral Spaceport is actually, it's NASA, it's the Air Force, it's in state statute. That is our responsibility, all of those capabilities, those launch sites, but it's actually bigger than that. It includes the manufacturing supply chain, the universities providing the talent pipeline, and just fundamentally the culture that we have here on the Space Coast that's acclimated to knowing what it is to run a launch business, to being familiar with the launch operations, how things work, the tourism that's geared to taking advantage of watching launches. That's you know, for a lot of people, watching a rocket launch is a bucket list kind of item. It's really cool. I mean, I've been here since 1955. We've launched, I think, over 2,500 times in that time, and I've certainly seen most of them. They're all cool. You don't get tired of it. And this is really the most interesting part, is that's Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. They're the new private big billionaires coming into business. But you also have Richard Branson, Paul Allen with Microsoft, Bob Bigelow with the private space stations. These are very wealthy business people with their own money involved. They behave entirely differently and much more entertainingly than the traditional Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman. These guys get feisty and personal and angry at one another, and it's really entertaining. And our job is to make sure those billionaires are fighting here, because we don't want them fighting in Texas. So that's kind of our job. Thank you.
Next on our panel is Frank O'Day. He is the Director of Transportation Development for the Florida Department of Transportation, FDOT, District 5, covering East Central Florida. His primary role with District 5 is to ensure the production of its work program, which exceeds $1 billion a year. Frank serves as the District 5 Executive Champion for the I-4 Ultimate Project, a $2.3 billion reconstruction and expansion of I-4. Frank is a registered professional engineer in Florida and is a civil engineering graduate of the University of Illinois. He has been with the Florida Department of Transportation since 1986.
Thank you. I was asked to talk a little bit about how the Florida Department of Transportation and our projects are going to impact the landscape of Brevard County. So I looked at that and I realized that we impact this area kind of in two levels. From a big picture level, our mission at the Florida Department of Transportation is to efficiently and safely move people and goods. And over the last few years with Governor Scott, there's really been an emphasis on freight movement. So we certainly have taken that seriously. And to let people know the way our policies work is we fund preservation of our system first. Our roads, the maintenance of our bridges and roads comes off the top, as well as safety. So we fund those things first, and then with the remaining funds we have, we take 75% of those, and we fund what we call the SIS, the Strategic Intermodal System. And what that is the statewide network of facilities that we think are super important to the viability of Florida. So they're all our interstates, they're our ports, they're the spaceport, they're the airports, Sunrail, different transit entities are these SIS. And what it is, there are important modes and the connectors to those modes. So 75% of the funds that the Florida Department of Transportation gets goes towards this strategic intermodal system. So what is that in Brevard County? Well, the recent completion of the widenings of I-95 in Brevard County. Recently, we're completing I-95 widening all the way through the whole state, both I-95 and I-75. With the cooperation of Brevard County Commission, we were able to do some very innovative financing and bring that widening up to Volusia County at least a decade earlier than we anticipated. So we used a design-build finance mechanism, and the county helped out by backing some bonds. Another SIS facility connects two big modes, and I think, again, this is the second time recently where the Orlando International Airport and the Port Canaveral boards met together, and they're connected by one of our facilities, and that's State Road 528, a very important SIS facility. In District 5, we're beginning the design of the widening of State Road 528 between I-95 and the port is the first phase. And one of the things you're gonna, if you were watching the news in the Orlando area yesterday, a lot of controversy about a project over there to add managed lanes to a toll facility. Well, because of funding, all of our capacity that we're adding to any expressways are going to be managed lanes. And what that is toll lanes. So, but look at it this way, when you're coming to get people to the port, they're coming from either north or south, and they want to get to Port Canaveral. The idea is that you give them a choice. You can either go on the general use lanes and not pay a toll, or if you want to guarantee travel time to get to the port, you can pay a price. So that's the concept behind managed lanes, and Florida is developing a managed lanes network that you'll see throughout the state. Interesting thing is it's not really a revenue generating tool, although it will generate revenue. The real key behind that, though, is to develop a process where we can better guarantee that people will have a guaranteed time that they can get someplace. So imagine if you wanted to get to the port and you needed to get there, you're willing to pay $3 or $4 to get on the toll lanes to get there on time. Another important job that we've been working with Brevard County over the last few years is the St. John's Heritage Parkway. And that's been a project with Brevard County for many years. It's got some different unique features, but the impact is a little different. In Melbourne, we're going to be putting a new interchange along I-95 at Ellis Road for a direct connect to the airport and get that traffic, instead of traveling on US 92 or Galley Boulevard, a direct connect. So that's important for economic development. And then, of course, a new interchange in the southern part of the county in Palm Bay. And not only is that going to be good for economic development, but also evacuation. I think that's an important feature down there. So those are things we're working on. I heard mentioned earlier the future corridors. That's a big initiative where we're looking long term. How do we connect in the future medical city area of Orlando over here to Brevard County? And their plans are in the works right now to work with major landowners and reserve corridors so that we can provide a corridor for multimodal transit. So expect that to be coming to fruition. We heard earlier today about the Orlando Airport. I'm happy to announce that we participated. Part of the SIS is the Melbourne Airport, and we worked with them and helped provide funding for that new tower. Port Canaveral, of course, we work with quite a bit, and Spaceport as well. So that's kind of our big picture. We also understand that our roads are features that go through communities, so we are very focused on a local level of looking at how our roads impact communities. So we've got a big Complete Streets initiative where we're looking at improving our bike and ped safety. Space Coast TPO is very active with us in that initiative. And so that's kind of a few of the things we're working on. It's never a dull moment.
Thank you, Frank. Interesting, like one of the questions that we have to ask the panelists, and Anna did as well, is how do you collaborate with other entities and organizations? And every panel member has talked about that. And it's interesting that all of these four panelists and the other before have all worked together, and that's how the economy has grown and how we continue to move forward. So with that, I'm going to start with the other questions, starting with Commissioner Barfield. What is the greatest challenge facing Brevard County?
There's a few challenges. one of them right now, I believe, is the Indian River Lagoon. We have a lot of major issues with that. We are getting funding to remove muck. We had 20 million last year, probably get about the same this year, depending on what the governor does on the budget. There's so many different aspects to the Indian River Lagoon. There's septic tanks, there's sewage treatment plants. We have a lot of septic tanks. We are increasing a lot of the sewage treatment plant capability with additional lift stations and things to get it out further, but that's still an issue. All of this goes into the Indian River Lagoon. We still have stormwater discharge where we really don't have any other place for it to go yet because we have to have retention areas. We're doing that, but there's a lot of issues with it and it's a lot of money involved and it's a big challenge. And I think another big challenge that we have, as we're seeing more, is as we develop, we are still behind the curve on our infrastructure, primarily roads. The south part of the county is really the worst situation with roads. Central part and the north part are not as bad. In central part, where I am, a lot of the roads are state roads. The feeder roads are all state roads. And we don't have as many capacity issues that we do and as we do in the south part of the county. And it doesn't get better. We have to put funding to it, and the funding is just not there. We've had our Blue River report that was done, and I attempted to go ahead and push through the recommendations in that, and the first one didn't make it, didn't go through on the county commission. That's okay. We'll keep working through it and try to figure other ways to do the funding. But at some point it's going to get even much worse as we bring in more work. So I think those two are the major challenges that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Justice, same question to you. What's the greatest challenge facing the board?
I would answer this question. There's two parts to it. We need to manage growth with a balanced portfolio. And the two parts to that, managing growth, we've really had our foot to the gas pedal to the floor, and the demand is there for cruise and cargo, and we're growing, and we got a little ahead of ourselves, and the public certainly has let us know, okay, and rightfully so. I think the previous panel talked about it a little bit as well. So we need to manage our growth, and we're going to do that. We're going to take the foot off the gas a little bit, and to be a little bit smarter, not smarter, just be a little more deliberate as we embrace the incredible potential that we have across our business lines. On the balance side, if you ask me to balance our portfolio, we could shutter every restaurant out there. We could bulldoze the entire place and put nothing but cruise lines out there. And that business model would be very attractive to a whole lot of people as far as revenue generation and to the cruise industry, because we have just such a prime cruise departure point. But we have a cruise ship that decides to go into a hurricane or whatever else they did the week later, and all of a sudden the cruise industry is a pretty fickle world. All travel is, all vacations are. So do you want to put all your eggs in that basket? Probably not. So how do we balance that portfolio? How do we grow cargo in a mitigated but certainly important way? Let's be honest here. This state's going to grow by how many? 6 million people in the next 15 years? That's what I've heard. And they're going to be east of Orlando is where they're going, right? And that's right between here and there. So there's goods and services that need to be delivered, and certainly the port's a gateway to do it. So grow cargo and somewhat work on that balance. So manage growth and a balanced portfolio.
Thank you. Dale, you mentioned several challenges you're facing with Space Florida. What is your greatest challenge?
Well, I think our biggest issue is we're not unlike pretty much everybody else. It's figuring out how to rise to a changing marketplace. The government's going to continue to be an important player in the space business with NASA's exploration missions and national security. The world's not getting any safer. But the commercial sector is really where the growth opportunity is, because the federal budget's not going to get a heck of a lot bigger, certainly not for space launch activity. The commercial sector is where the growth is, and we've got to stay ahead of that. I think for the most part, NASA and the Air Force are great partners. They have their job to do. They're doing it really, they're working their tails off. We have, I wouldn't say clashing, but we have lots of issues to work through with Bob Cabana. But at the end of the day, his job's a lot harder than ours is. So we respect that. Like I said, NASA and the Air Force are doing a really good job of doing what they can to accommodate. But our job is to stay ahead of the changing marketplace, and because the rest of the country and the rest of the world can do what we can do here if we don't respond and stay ahead of the marketplace. And I guess the analogy that we're using now is this particular location, those Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Base, the Cape Canaveral Spaceport, that was the area that this country chose to be the gateway to space for this country. And if you look out, 50, 100, 200 years, you're going to have a lot of commerce coming and going into the solar system from space, from the planet Earth. We want that to be happening here because there are at least two viable companies with billionaires funding them, and making good progress, to go mine asteroids. And there are all of the rare earth minerals that are on Earth that are called rare earth because they're rare here. They're in unlimited supply out there. You're going to have commerce going back and forth. If we can start harvesting asteroids, we don't need to plunder our own planet. And there are a number of asteroids out there that we know of that have $50 trillion worth of platinum on it. Now, obviously, if you bring back $50 trillion worth of platinum on planet Earth, the price of platinum just fell through the floor, and you might have made a bad decision. But we're going to manage that. And the way we look at it is this area should be the equivalent of what London was for hundreds of years for the British Empire. It's where the empire did business, going out and coming in. And the country's already decided that this is the area where that activity should occur for the space marketplace as we bring economic activity into the solar system. And if we do our job right, that's what we'll be able to do. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of challenges, but I think the goal's pretty lofty. A lot of fun.
Frank, I think you've talked a little bit about the challenges of FDOT, but what is the greatest challenge that FDOT faces in this Brevard County metropolitan area?
Well, I think it's a problem that a lot of us face is funding. Funding for us is by far the biggest challenge, and the funding model that we currently use to fund transportation is just not working. And a lot of people know that it's a gas tax-based economy, and the problem is no matter how high or how low the gas prices are, the amount of tax generated for infrastructure improvements doesn't change. It's 18 cents federal, 18 cents state. So actually, gas prices going down helps us a little bit because more people drive. But it's a model where we're encouraging more efficient vehicles, we're encouraging people to drive less, we're encouraging all sorts of things that don't help us fund ourselves. So coming up with that new model, and it's been talked about for a while, in addition to that, I think the other big issue for Florida in particular is bicycle and pedestrian safety. Big problem for us. It's a known problem. We've been working on it. I look at it this way: if in the United States, 38,000 people a year are killed on our highways. 38,000. And if it was anything else killing them, there would be an uproar about, oh my God, we got to do something about this. 38,000 people. And we try to keep it very personal. Every time there's a fatality on a state highway in our district secretary, Noreen Downs, and myself and our other director, we get the email, we read it, because we need to keep that personal, because I know if it's your family member, the statistics don't mean anything, these ruin people's lives. So fixing that is really high on our priority list. And quite honestly, the solution to both the funding and the safety kind of we believe are very similar, and a lot of it is based in technology and using the technology to its fullest to help us with the vehicle miles traveled sort of technology. The biggest hold up there is some valid concerns that people have about privacy, and we need to be able to address that privacy concern before I think we can make any headway.
Commissioner Barfield, I'm going to go back to you, and I'm going to give you a choice of two questions.
Oh, boy.
First, what is the county's #1 priority? Or what does the county's future look like?
I'm going to take the second one. And I'm a glass half full person, not a glass half empty. I think the future looks really good for our county. And there's a number of reasons. I think economically, we generate our own economy. I was just thinking when you were talking that we're a quintimodal transportation system here. I heard that term not too long ago. We've got space, air, water, rail, and automobile. Not too many places have that. So we're unique. We have a diverse type of county. But I think it's going to go good because we are diversifying. I think we have a great school system. And all those things drive, we have great universities here. All that drives the future economically. And economics really drive our success as a county. It does it from the standpoint of making schools continue to be better. It makes our level of charitable donations go up. It helps our input into society. And the other side of that is our population, average population in Brevard County is almost 47 years old. I wish I could remember when I was 47 years old, but that tells us that it's an aging population, but there's also millennials coming in too, and it's the younger population. So we have a great diverse group. We have highly professional, we have highly skilled. And you put all those things together, I think the future looks really good for Brevard County.
Commissioner Justice, same option questions for you. #1 priority or what does the future for the port look like?
Let's talk about the future a little bit. Again, you look at the business line construct, and I mentioned I've already hit cruise pretty good, but again, the demand for cruise, 23 million people in the world cruise every year, and 15 million of them leave out of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, or Cape Canaveral. Okay, so you get a feel for the magnitude of the potential here, and so we're going to rehab the terminals we have, and we're going to put another new terminal in somewhere. Figure that out, and there's going to be more cruise passengers, and the cruise ships, couldn't be more delighted with that. Let's also understand that every cruise ship that comes in, whether they tie up here, they come in for a port call, they take on fuel, they take on supplies. Those ships that come out of New York, they don't get their fruits and vegetables and stuff up there. They come down here and get it. It's an export business. It doesn't get exported anywhere except onto the cruise ships and gets consumed. But there's a whole other tier of business that flows through the cruise industry. On the cargo side, 90+% of everything you buy comes by container from somewhere. It's in a container. And so containers are the transportation network of the world. And if and when, how much we get here, how it grows, the Suez Canal really not going to affect us as much as I think people think it is. But this increased size of the Suez Canal is going to affect it. And goods are going to start flowing west into the East Coast, and that may help us. So the ability for us to absorb and to transfer cargo containers is certainly a future that we're going to deal with. The inland ports obviously is the answer for that. The retail real estate world, that's as much as the local world wants to make it, and our arms are open for that. So there's one other potential I would embrace on the cargo side. LNG, liquefied natural gas, is now being produced in our country. As a long-term Coast Guard guy, I can tell stories up in the Northeast about incredible protests about LNG ships coming in, all that scare and danger and all that sort of stuff. Now we produce it. okay? We have an abundant supply of natural gas, and in Miami, in downtown Miami right now, they are producing LNG for East Coast Railroad, and it goes on the trains. The potential to do that up in Titusville is as well. They want to put a bigger plant up there. The ability for us to take that LNG and to bunker our cruise ships, to export that LNG to the Bahamas, to the Caribbean, where they're going to take their diesel generating plants and turn them into LNG, which is cleaner and cheaper, generated plants, trains, that potential is there. And we're going to work pretty hard to embrace that as well. So, future's rosy.
Dale, what does the future of Space Florida look like?
I see us becoming much more getting more involved in integrating the whole state, because we're starting now utilizing, we use the analogy of a pyramid with Florida Tech, Embry-Riddle, and UCF as the cornerstone really of this region, academically and as well as just regionally. Because if you look at, I think the I-4 corridor is one of the top 20 economic engines in the entire country. And if you use the high-tech corridor, that political entity, that also brings in the academic capabilities, University of Florida and South Florida. And so we've really got a great potential to grow in helping to raise Florida's standards in, again, getting to Linda's thing about manufacturing. Because if you look at what we used to be just a launch site, most of my career in the space program was just Florida's where you design it, you build it elsewhere, and you ship it forward and you shoot it. We now, thanks to a conscious effort by the state about 8 or 9 years ago to make investments, we now build the Orion capsule for Lockheed Martin, Boeing's CST-100 Starliner capsule. We're now going to be building Blue Origin's rockets, and hopefully we're not too far away from a couple more announcements that are really going to have us building more of the soup to nuts of what the space program involves. Now, we still have to work on the R&D angle of it, because Florida traditionally was a very low performer in getting NASA science dollars. But that's because NASA said, look at all the money you're getting for shuttle. And so we tried to argue that, and we were unsuccessful. Well, now all that money isn't flowing in for shuttle. So Florida's starting to make some real progress in capturing science budget, which then spins off the technology that begins the design work. So we're really getting the whole value chain of the space business. So I think when you integrate that with the aviation capability that's growing here, both with Embraer, with Northrop, with Piper's been down in Indian River County now for decades and decades. The Airbus, which is putting a major facility in Mobile, that's stimulating a lot of economic activity in the Panhandle that's aviation related. And the maintenance, repair, and overhaul activity that occurs down in Miami, Fort Lauderdale is a $10, $12 billion a year industry. Florida's really starting to beef itself up as a manufacturing destination, a manufacturing location where it happens here. So I think if we can help to further integrate that industrial capability, that academic capability in the workforce, we can take over the world.
I like it.
Frank, I'm not sure how those questions will work for you.
Well, I mean, I kind of tipped my hand a little bit when I talk about the future and what do we see. You know, we, as an agency, the Florida Department of Transportation is a highly outsourced agency. I think 5 years ago, our work program was $6 billion and we had 10,000 employees. Our work program today is $10 billion and we have 6,000 employees. And we use a lot of consultants, some of them are here, that help us deliver the work program. So our focus, you know, we have engineers and consultants and planners that help us with those sorts of functions, but our agency is switching to the planning focus and working with the vehicle manufacturers on autonomous vehicles. I mean, that is where our future is. You look at the capacity we have right now in a lot of areas, if we could just improve the throughput, we wouldn't have to add any more lanes. We just make people drive closer together. And the vehicle manufacturers are really taking the lead here. And if you bought a car in the last few years, you just notice those things that are there that are very helpful and improve safety. You know, and imagine if just your cell phone, you know, what you're walking down the street and your cell phone is doing what it does, which is pinging or whatever, and your car's going by, it's going to know where you are. So it will be able to make decisions to avoid you if it knows you're there. I mean, we have the capability, you know, you talk about the future being bright. I believe we have the ability to have a transportation network that actually is fatality free. We have that capability. And I think, you know, my son he's a mechanical engineering student at UCF, and he was the one that said, you know, someday they're going to be coming to you. His kids are coming to me and say, you mean you used to actually drive around in that car? I was like, yeah, it used to be a lot of fun, but now you just go in and let it take you where you need to go. I do think that's a possible future. It would be better for our environment. It would be, you know, the whole idea of having a vehicle that you own that sits idle for 23 of the 24 hours in a day. Why do we do that? But I think the future will definitely go that direction.
We'd like to take time now to have questions from the audience. Okay. Yeah, it's hard to see up here.
Yeah, you got to see from there.
Right here, it's Tim. Oh, thanks.
My question is for Frank O'Day. Frank, good to see you here, and thank you all of you panelists for being here. But I was wondering, are you aware of any demonstration projects on smart highways or smart vehicles that are coming up in Florida? As any kind of an announcement or anything?
Well, I mean, I think the Turnpike actually has been an approved test bed when there was an ITS World Congress held in Florida a few years back, where we actually did have the demonstration project in that area around the beach line and the convention center in the Orlando area. It's not been really kept up, but the legislation that, I mean, from what I understand, California and Florida are kind of the leaders in this area, but the approach our lawmakers are taking is it should be allowable, allow the auto manufacturers to do these things until we find there's problems and then legislate. California's approach is they're applying these legislations and then it's kind of hemming people in. And I like the approach we're taking because it allows that innovation. It allows the future to be coming quicker without us holding people back. So again, I know that the Turnpike has an approved test bed, but I'm not sure if they're where that's going. I also know that they've just started working with the new university along I-4 there in the Lakeland area, where there's some research facility going on there, and that's where I think you're going to see a lot of work in the near future. You know something? You might.
What's the big challenge with developing Shiloh?
Well, there's a lot of environmental pushback, as there absolutely should be. The issue for us is fundamentally it's a land use issue. That was what the land was taken for. The federal government went and pushed a lot of people out. Where we're proposing to put the location is Old Fallow Orange Grove. There were, scores and scores of houses, post offices, schools. It wasn't really pristine up there. And the federal government came and took that land specifically to support the space program. The recreational, environmental, and conservation issues are conditional uses. But there's no reason why that can't stay that way. What we're proposing would increase the development within the refuge by 0.24%. But again, our issue is this is where the country said it was supposed to have a space activity, And if we don't provide that activity and Georgia opens up Camden Spaceport, you've got, SpaceX has said it's going to need another launch pad. Blue Origin's going to be launching off at 36. That's great. That's really important. I don't see Jeff Bezos sitting quietly with Elon Musk having 4 launch sites and he's only got 1. And that precludes other people getting into the business, some of whom have already talked to us about additional commercial launch sites. And we're pretty much, the Air Force has pretty much said we're running out of room at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. The pressure's not on immediately, which is good because this EIS process is taking years and years. Our friends in Georgia are going to find out exactly how much fun that is. But that's all appropriate. What we're trying to do is figure out how can we go forward with win-win scenarios, because right now the lagoon again is starting to relapse. There's big issues. The brown tide's coming back in the northern part of the lagoon and Mosquito Lagoon. Shiloh's neither going to help nor hinder that. But as the process of taking additional land out of the refuge, that is an environmental impact. There's no question about it. Is there a way to leverage that additional environmental impact in Washington, in Tallahassee, regionally, with the private sector companies that are going to want to come in there? You've got Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. They're both West Coast billionaires who have concerns about their own green image. What we're trying to do is figure out how we craft a scenario where by taking this property, you're going to have mitigation requirements that are going to be the floor of what you have to do to mitigate the impact. That should be a minimum. How do we politically exploit this opportunity to get additional resources down here to address the lagoon? That's the big project, but maybe other issues. The bike trails that are going to go by there. Bikers, what they really want most is bathrooms, nice bathrooms, maybe with showers. Well, we'll put one, and whoever takes those launch sites has got a responsibility, and I would think they would want to sponsor a nice bike path adjacent there. Or there are fish hatcheries. The Florida Department of Fish and Wildlife has a great new facility at the old New Smyrna Beach High School. It's designed and equipped for it, but there is no money for fish hatcheries and seagrass hatcheries. Well, I've already talked to Senator Nelson's office because they've worked something similar in the Panhandle as a result of BP activity. Let's get some additional fish hatcheries for redfish and trout and seagrass to help repair the Mosquito Lagoon and Northern Indian River Lagoon. There's lots of things that we can try to do to turn this into a grand bargain, because I think at the end of the day, I think we're going to succeed because it is a land use issue. This is what the land was taken for. But, it shouldn't be a win-win. I've been here my whole life. I grew up in Cocoa Beach in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. These islands are precious to me. The river's precious to me. Let's exploit the political process to get more out of it so that the stakeholders will get more that they really need and they really want with our success than they would get out of them killing the program. I didn't mean to drone on, but obviously
I think we have time for one more question. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like to thank the panelists. It's been wonderful having you here. I learned many new words, including quintimodal. I like that.
I'll test you on it.
Thank you very much.